If you're watching this video, there's a high likelihood you've stayed in an Airbnb before. And honestly, why wouldn't you? The platform's easy to use, it has good availability, and the price of an apartment or a house is often less or equal to that of a hotel room. However, how did a company that started as an amateur's home sharing platform turn into a rental market disruptor that only benefits the rich? This is the story of Airbnb. Airbnb all started in 2007 with two broke young men in San Francisco. Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia had just moved to San Francisco from New York. Both of them were unemployed and both of them were drowning in credit card debt. This meant they both struggled to pay rent. Trying to come up with a way to pay rent, they noticed the Industrial Design Conference was coming up and that all hotels in the city were booked.
So here's what I pitch my best friend and my new roommate, Brian Chesky. Brian thought of a way to make a few bucks, turning our place into designer's bed and breakfast, offering designers who come to town a place to crash, complete with wireless internet, a small desk space, sleepy mat, and breakfast each morning. Ha!
They bought some air mattresses and created a website called Air Bed and Breakfast. They offered a place to sleep and breakfast for $80 a night. A 30-year-old Indian man, a 35-year-old Boston woman, and a 45-year-old father of four all signed up. However, the idea didn't take off after that. The team attracted a new co-founder called Nathan Blatcherzik, which was the technical architect of the company. And they relaunched the website in August of 2008 during the Democratic National Convention in Denver. But after the convention, the booking stopped. The company struggled for another year, making around $200 per week and selling election-themed cereals such as Obama's and Captain McCain's, which actually made them a cool $30,000. Soon after the company received its first $20,000 in funding, and after talking with customers in New York, they changed their business from shared spaces to all types of accommodation, and the rest is history. But how can a company that started with two people trying to make rent become so heavily and negatively associated with the unaffordability of the housing market? And how much of it is true? Let's start with the central concept of the problem. People that criticize Airbnb for disrupting the housing market typically describe the problem as follows. There's only a certain number of houses available for rent or sale in a certain area. If those houses aren't available for short-term rent, we have a natural balance of supply and demand. Rental prices are dictated by what people in the area earn, meaning they are typically affordable for the local community. Since sale prices are largely affected by potential rental returns, the same can be said for the average sale price. Furthermore, there typically is enough availability of both rental places and for sale places, because this has ideally been planned for by municipalities and governments. The criticism on Airbnb is that the platform disrupts this natural balance. By providing real estate owners with the opportunity to rent out their places for more money, both rental and real estate prices increase. This is because rental prices aren't linked to the income of the local community anymore. Instead, it depends on what a tourist is willing to spend on his vacation. At the same time, availability for the local community decreases as houses are moved from the long-term rental or for sale category to the short-term rental category. Or, at least, that's the criticism in theory. But what does the research say about this? We need to look at research that focuses on the main points that we just discussed. Let's take the largest Airbnb market to begin with, the United States. In 2017, Airbnb had a total of 660,000 listings in the United States. At the same time, the US had a total of 136.57 million housing units. However, these aren't all complete apartments or houses. Typically, 55% of listings is for complete units, meaning 363 units are for rent on Airbnb. This equals to 0.27% of the complete housing market. Skip forward to 2021 and there are 2.249 million listings, which equals to around 1.2 million units. With a total of 141.95 million units, this equals to about 0.87% of the complete housing market. So, on a national scale, it's hard to imagine this having a large effect. But let's look at it from a smaller scale. How about New York City? That calculation took way too long, it was way too boring, so I'm just going to summarize it. It was 0.31% in New York, and the point of it all is just that it's not a lot of houses compared to the overall market. That's the point. So let's continue. However, maybe Airbnb has more effect on price than it has on availability. Now, it could be that even though Airbnb doesn't take up a large availability, presence of the platform in a region still affects the rental price and the real estate value. This is most likely because landlords have the option to rent out their spaces. They may opt not to, but the the presence of Airbnb still raises the rental prices or real estate prices. Research done in 2020 showed that a 1% increase in Airbnb listings in an area increased the rental price by 0.018% and housing prices by 0.026%. Let's go back to an earlier example of the United States. There, we saw that in 2017 there were 660,000 listings. In 2021, these were 2.249 million listings, an increase of around 340.76%. This would mean Airbnb has been responsible for a 6.13% increase in rental price between 2017 and 2021. Also, they've been responsible for an 8.86% increase in housing prices. Given that the average US rent in 2017 was $1,116 per month, and that number has increased to $1,450 per month in 2021, which is a 30% increase, this means that Airbnb is responsible for a fifth of the rental price increase in the United States between the periods. However, let's take a couple seconds and see if Airbnb also has positive effects, or if they really are the embodiment of evil capitalism. First of all, the presence of Airbnb in a region does help the development of the region, especially of course the local real estate market. Research has shown that a 1% increase in Airbnbs led to a 0.77% increase in permit applications. Other research compared regulated and unregulated area in the San Francisco and Chicago metropolitan areas. Here, they found that Airbnb supply dropped 40% in regulated areas. However, this increased regulation also led to an increase of foreclosures in the most dense regions. Researchers noticed an increase of 170% in foreclosures. Finally, Airbnb likes to claim they support local communities because they bring in new tourists. However, research found that only between 2 and 4% of travelers wouldn't have taken a trip if there were no Airbnbs. In other words, 96 to 98% of people that stayed in an Airbnb would have stayed in that region anyway, most likely in a hotel. In the end, Airbnb is what I'm going to call an inequality amplifier. Clearly, it doesn't favor long-term renters in the local market. As of this date, 8.4 million Americans are behind on their rent and many more are struggling, making this a very real and urgent issue. On the other hand, Airbnb helps homeowners. However, it just so happens that 19.1% of non-primary residences in the US are owned by the richest 20%. It's therefore safe to say that Airbnb helps the people who don't really need it, whereas it makes life more difficult for the 264 million Americans that are not in the top 20.